So the Vomero 16 with the ZoomX layer, who would have thought that this was one of the firmest shoes that I've tested this year? Hello everybody, hope you're doing okay and welcome to my cabin. Now it's a bit cold to do a review outside today, so I thought I would do one inside. I haven't done a new shoe review for a while, so I thought I'd take out the Nike Air Zoom Vomero 16. I think we'll just call them the Vomeros from now on. So this is what I would call an everyday trainer. It's a very similar weight to the Nike Invincible, but perhaps doesn't really get so much attention. Now that's kind of surprising in a way, because it's actually got a Nike ZoomX foam in the heel, and you think this is an ultra soft shoe, but bizarrely it's perhaps one of the firmest shoes that I've tested this year. So despite the fact that they've got this ZoomX layer in the back, you don't really feel that at all. So I've been using this shoe now for all my runs throughout the last week, so I've racked up about 40 miles in it now, so I've got a pretty good view. I've taken it out on roads in the main, but also did a bit of cross country, shall we say. So because it's got a very aggressive outsole, it's not bad as a road to trail shoe. It's not very waterproof, but the upper here, it does at least will be sort of resistant, so I think you'll probably be okay. So a quick overview of the shoe. Got an engineered mesh at the front, which is reasonably breathable even at the moment in December. I'm not feeling any sort of discomfort there. The tongue is very plush, although I do find it quite a wide shoe. I've obviously got very narrow feet, so I don't know if you can see, but I've had to cinch down these laces quite a lot. And these things here, you would think that you'd be able to get them quite tight, but they are a bit restricted in how much you can pull them together. I think the actual base of the shoe is quite wide in the first place. So I think if you've got a wide foot, this would be an ideal shoe for you. If you're like me with a narrow foot, I'm really having to tug them in to feel like I've got a good lockdown. You could actually do the double knot though if you wanted to. I haven't done that, but that may be another option. At the rear, you've got quite a firm heel cup, so this is almost bordering on a sort of a mild stability shoe. I'm certainly feeling quite stable in this one. And it's got a very plush heel cup at the back here, which I'm not finding too bad. I mean, you might argue what is the purpose of it, but certainly not having any Achilles issues, that's quite good. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the midsole has got this ZoomX layer at the back, and it's got Air Zoom at the front. Now, I think as I'm sort of a mid-foot to sort of toe-off runner, perhaps that's why I'm not really feeling the ZoomX at all. So I'm sort of landing about here somewhere, which is definitely a lot firmer. If I sort of flex that there at the front, you can see that's sort of going in a bit, but the whole shoe itself is fairly rigid, I'd say, for a shoe. So certainly when you're going along, you feel like you're sort of a bit slappy almost, and it's not that curved. So it's a shoe that's not great for sort of like picking up the pace. Today I was sort of reaching down to about 730s on a sort of fairly flat terrain, and it was sort of felt like quite hard work. I felt like I was sinking a bit back into the shoe because it was a bit slappy. So I think it's definitely a shoe that you don't really want to be taking up for your tempo days. I mean, you could obviously, and perhaps you're a better runner than me, and perhaps if it was actually a bit narrower or my foot was a bit wider, then it might actually fit better and just get a bit of lockdown. But I'm sort of quite liking them. I mean, they do remind me of sort of the Pegasus in terms of like, it's sort of like a much more sort of traditional shoe. If you compare it to say the Invincible here, although this weight of this one is almost the same, I think it's just a fraction heavier, not really much in it, but such a different ride experience in the two shoes, despite the fact that they've both got ZoomX in the heel. This one really feels like you're bouncing up and down, and this one just sort of feels like complete the reverse. It feels quite firm. If I try and measure the relative widths of them, the Invincible is just very slightly wider, but it's not as wide a base as you think. So I think it sort of pretty explains why that feels a bit odd. And the Invincible has got a much better lockdown. I feel like I can tighten my foot much more across the midfoot here. So I think although this is fractionally wider at the base, it actually feels narrower on foot, the Invincible. So the laces aren't too bad. They're not sort of mega long. I do a double knot and just tie off the ends. That's not too bad. So the outsole is perhaps one of the good things about it, and perhaps one of the bad things, because I think that's quite an aggressive sort of studded area. So I think that's why it works reasonably well off-road. If you've just got a little bit of trail, obviously not going to work so great if you're just really muddy. But I certainly felt I was not having any problems with grip. But on the converse side, you feel like the rubber is quite sort of firm. It just adds to the general firmness of the shoe. So if you go over some standard specs, Nike say in the standard UK 9 it's 309 grams. Now that compares with the Invincible, which is 314 in the standard size 9. And the Vomero is much more of a sort of a lower to the ground shoe relatively. It's 19.5 at the front and 29.5 at the back for a 10mm drop. That compares to the Invincible, which is a lot higher stack at 27.6 at the front and 36.6 at the back. Not quite sure how they get that 0.6, but that's a 9mm drop. And in my size, interestingly, the differential between the UK 9s at 309 and 314 is exactly the same. In my size, it's 376 grams in the Vomeros and 381 grams in the Invincible. So that's pretty sort of a heavy shoe, really, but it's sort of pretty much standard as I expect now for a sort of an everyday trainer. If you compare that to the Endorphin Speed, is around about 280. So that's probably why I do most of my running in Endorphin Speeds these days. It's just so much lighter on foot, and the cushioning is nearly as good, if not better in some respects. And especially with the Run Shield version that I've been enjoying recently. That's the one I did my 35-mile, 55k run on last week. The legs sort of felt a bit hard for a few days afterwards, but when I put these on, they kind of feel that there was perhaps the ideal cushioning I was looking for. But I thought I'd get out in these for a few runs to see how they are for this review. So if you go through the scoring system, my scoring system starts with the fit. I'll give this a 6 out of 10 for the fit, compared to a 7 out of 10 for the Invincible. I think just mainly because of the fact that I'm struggling a bit with lockdown across the front here. I think if you're a sort of wider foot, you won't have any problems, but you know, I can only give these scores for myself and how they work for me. And it's also about how adaptable the shoe are, because you kind of think, well, if it's really good design, it will work for all types of foot, which I think the Invincible does quite well, actually. The next one is cushioning. Now, I've only given this 6 out of 10. I think that perhaps that's a bit harsh on the cushioning, but I think just because of that firm ride, I just feel sometimes that I want to feel a bit more plushness under the foot. I gave the Invincible 10 out of 10 for cushioning, which means it just sort of bounced along. And not necessarily is always the best thing, because sometimes you feel like you really are sinking into that Invincible shoe. And this one's almost kind of the reverse. In a way, that's quite good, because if you've got like a polarised choice there between two shoes from Nike as their sort of top of the range everyday trainers, both have got a bit of ZoomX in, but they're completely different shoes, really. In terms of speed, I'm going to only give this 4 out of 10, same as the Invincible. I just don't think this is a shoe that really is designed for going fast in. I think I'll be struggling to even get down to my marathon pace. Maybe I'm not that sort of sharp at the moment. I'm doing a lot of miles, averaging about 60 miles since the London Marathon. So I'm feeling sort of quite aerobically fit, but just not really sharp. So maybe that's a slight issue. And the fact it's actually quite cold at the moment, it's not really helping. But yeah, I just don't feel that these shoes are really ones that I'm really going to be able to run fast in. And as an overall score, I think I'll give this 6 out of 10, which is sort of a pretty standard score. I'll give the Invincible 7 out of 10 because I think that's just a bit more exciting shoe. I think this one is a good sort of staple diet. I managed to get this through the 25% off deal recently, so brought it down to just over £100, which is not too bad for modern shoes. The Invincible, obviously, you could have got that for 25% off as well. And I think between the two, I think they sort of serve different purposes. I think the Invincible is a shoe that I always want to take out when my legs are really battered, whereas this is a shoe that I feel like is more literally is an everyday trainer. So will I continue to use this one? Well, yeah, I think so. Probably for the odd run. I mean, it's probably a shoe that I've been trying to sort of get some miles in to sort of justify getting them. But I know Ed Budd was quite keen on them, and I must say I'm not sharing quite his enthusiasm for them. I think they're just sort of a bit of a, yeah, you sort of take it or leave it shoe. I think there's better shoes around. But if you bought a pair, then yeah, I think you're going to get some good use out of them. I think it's a shoe that's going to last a fair amount of time. I don't think it's a bit stupid to make predictions, because unless you actually run in a shoe for 200, 300 miles, you're not really going to know. After 40 or 50 miles, then, well, it's holding up fine at the moment. But, you know, just looking at the back, as some of the shoe tubers do, and say, oh, yeah, it's going to last you 500 miles. Well, yeah, the foam might disintegrate after 50 more miles. Who's going to know? But, yeah, it's certainly the shoe looks like a shoe that's designed to go the mile, extra mile, as it were. So I hope you enjoyed this little look at the Vomero 16. Is this a shoe that you've got? Have you considered it? I'll be interested to know in the comments, and I look forward to seeing the next one then. Bye! So a wrap on the Vomero 16, jumping over the GoPro. Bit of a tongue twister.